But when I'm talking to somebody, introducing myself cynically, I'm like, oh yeah, I run a telemarketing firm. I loaded into Orem, and then the first day that I called, I'm booking a meeting with the CFO at a Fortune 1000 company. I saw something on LinkedIn that was like the average cost per meeting for an SDR is $3,000. I'm like, man, I'm drastically undercharging people. The whole entire Odessa team, 7-8 reps, is all dialing for one account. And I don't know if this is a good idea because we end up burning out all of our budget in 1 month in this industry. The goal is to get a laugh. Regardless of all this other stuff I'm saying, if you can get them to laugh the first 15 seconds, there's at least a 50-50 shot you're getting a meeting. Doesn't matter. And then my favorite one, I'm putting this on a t-shirt, is that speaking your language? Which is a question that if you have the right fit, like if I'm calling a CRO and I ask, hey, are you guys active on the phones? Is that speaking your language? It forces them to express their perspective, their experience, their ego, right? I'll do like a 60-day proof of concept. For example, like 10 meeting budget, something like that. But I've gotten fired before for booking too many meetings on the first day. For one account, we booked them like, I don't even know, over 100 meetings in a month. One of my favorite reps was a cowboy in South Dakota. Shout out Derek. Our first day onboarding, he was like, yo, one sec, I got to go plug in my computer. Battery's broken. I'm like, what's wrong with your battery? He's like, oh, well, I left it plugged in for 4 years and never used it, so it's all messed up. I'm like, wow, so you haven't used a computer in 4 years? That's amazing. I like optimism, like to not let the grind, because I mean, dude, I'll sit there for 2 hours not get a meeting. You're like, oh my God, it's not going to work. And then you'll get 4 meetings in the last 30 minutes of the day. Okay, I'll preface all this by saying never listen to your brain when it's telling you to stop, because you don't really need to. It's all just like perception.
Welcome to Prospecting Pros, and on today's show we have Fletcher Cox. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for having me, John. Excited to be here.
Yeah, you bet. Fletcher and I have never met. We're just LinkedIn buds, and since we're both in the same space, I felt like he would have a lot of good insight around cold calling, so we will get into that in a little bit. But first, Fletcher, just give the audience a bit of background. You've got a very interesting story that we were discussing before we started recording. Give the audience a bit of background on your career, or how it got started, and how you got to where you are today.
All right. So I'm going to shout out this whole thing is just going to be an advertisement for all my silly little businesses. But I've always kind of been a bit of an entrepreneur, like going back to like in college, my first ever product or company you can still buy them. They're called strip straps. They're ankle straps for flip-flops that turn your flip-flops into adventure sandals. So I was always dabbling around with like entrepreneurship. Always thought that was pretty cool. Out of college, I worked at Oracle. So I did Oracle's like Class Up business development program, which, at least as like a young college grad, I was like, oh, this big corporation. But it ended up being really, really credible training and kind of a good logo, honestly, to have on your LinkedIn, and just like the network and knowledge of how like a large organization works. But I did business development at Oracle, which was just, initially back in 2017 when I started, it was cold calling and sending mail merges on Microsoft Outlook. So just like, it was kind of the Wild West for email. I remember like there's one guy on my team when I was a BD at Oracle. He's like, dude, I've only sent mail merges for the past 8 months and I'm crushing it. So like, it was like back when you could add like a link, an attachment, like ask for a social security number and email, it would all go through. So that's kind of where I started. Then I transitioned into more of like a sales director role at a small consulting firm. So that was like selling Oracle planning and budgeting products and like scoping out these relatively complex enterprise, basically CFO transformational projects. But again, that was a good exercise in learning how to sell something you don't understand, because I never logged into the software, but more so understood like the business requirements, the outcomes, the human impact. And that's like a big thing that I still advocate for. I'm like, dude, nobody cares how many APIs you have, let's say. They just want to know, how is this going to make my life easier? So I think that was like a big lesson from like helping grow this consulting firm. Then what you were mentioning, I took some time in 2023 and I did what's called the Pan American Highway, which I would prefer we just speak about for the rest of this call. But that was like a 7-month kind of childhood dream that I left Lake Tahoe, where I live, Northern California, Nevada, and drove to the end of South America over like 6 or 7 months. And so that was great. Made anything else like seem relatively easy, but like, at least transitioning out of there, I had like one other job in the Oracle ecosystem. Then I effectively started my own like sales advisory and now like business development services company about, I don't know, between a year and 6 months ago is kind of where I got the ball really rolling. So as it stands now, and we can touch on all those like, different experiences, but as it stands now, the company is called Ordesa, which is a reference to like this valley in Spain and France, which you can get to later. But we are 6-7 months old. We do dial for dollars, leveraging Orem. Orem is like our pick for our parallel dialer, our technology partner. And we do top of funnel business development, set qualified introductory meetings for, at least this past month, we billed 12 or 13 clients, some less than others, obviously, but our core specialty has been B2B SaaS with a heavier lean towards like analytics, finance. And then also we had a lot of success within financial services. But we're, when I'm talking to somebody, introducing myself cynically, I'm like, oh yeah, I run a telemarketing firm. We just call people.
Mm-hmm. Well, how did you actually get the idea that you're like, you know what, you already had the entrepreneurial spirit, I can tell from some of the other things I didn't know that the ankle straps are for the sandals, but how did you just get the idea like, you know what, I'm just going to start my own cold calling company?
So that's a great question. So let's rewind back. I finished a trip to South America. I got back to the US, started looking for jobs, got a job at another Oracle consulting firm, and it felt like kind of a lateral move. It didn't really feel like I was learning that much, and maybe I was just jaded because I was like feeling rebellious and like immature. But I basically had an opportunity from somebody in my network to help them kick off like an AI for finance company. And so it was definitely a risk because I was like, I don't know if this company would be successful. I have a good job. But I said, all right, regardless, I want to do this. So I'll figure out how AI works basically, or at least like, have an emphasis on new technology. So I led a couple of AI startups, like back about a year ago or so, a year and a half, did like advisory work for them. And so much of what we did was like everything but the thing, right? So like talking about how to identify customers, different campaigns to run, different events to do. And all anybody ever wanted was just to talk to their customer. And so I was doing advisory roles, kind of making recommendations, coming up with strategies, but not really doing the work. A lot of what I did, at least tactically early on, was like LinkedIn automation. And I was always playing around with parallel dialers. It was like this myth in my head. I'm like, I know they're out there. But I got hooked up with Orem, and they kind of gave me like a trial period. And I remember I was doing some consulting for like an Anaplan partner. I had a list of people, like not even that many phone numbers. I loaded it into Orem, and then the first day that I called, I'm booking a meeting with the CFO at a Fortune 1000 company. I'm like, this is valuable, and I really like it. I love I love it. I get it's like a slot machine to me. So what I at least led me to kind of grow the company was cold calling works. Like statistically, people pick up the phone. There will always be at a time where they pick up their phone. B, I can teach other people to do it. And C, it's not going to be as much fun if I'm just doing it by myself. So at least with Orem, initially, I had like a handful of like free trials, kind of a good partner agreement to start. And so I was able to onboard a couple people within my network. And I had a couple of early stage clients, and we said, you know what, like what's going to be the fastest way for us to A, make money, and then B, sell these projects is we'll just do dial for dollars. That every organization, like the cost per meeting can be boiled down into some number. I saw something on LinkedIn that was like the average cost per meeting for an SDR is $3,000. I'm like, man, I'm drastically undercharging people. But people want meetings, right? And so we just saw the phones as a really fast avenue. I can go into more of the details of like why I'm so adamant about the phones. But the company, at least like we've gravitated towards dial for dollars because it's very fast. It's fast to test if it works, even faster to figure out if it doesn't work. So we're able to provide a lot of feedback. And like I mentioned, like year one of running the company is I'm just gathering like a mound of evidence on how to get people to say yes to things on the phone. How we monetize that later on, whether that's through additional services, whether that's through recruiting, training, we will see. But like we get so many at bats or interactions with C-levels, CFOs on the phone because we call, at least, I call, a lot of my reps call for 3 to 5 hours a day, 10, 20 conversations a day.
Yeah. You know what my company does too. I'm also a big proponent of the phones. I think a lot of people are hesitant to pick up the phone and dial. You're certainly not, I can tell. But it's one of the best ways if you're trying to figure out what's going on. You just want to talk directly to somebody. Even if it's a no, you can still learn something. Okay, you're using a competitor. Why? Are you in a long-term contract? Can you get out of it? And it's just like you can start discovering things, and that's very valuable information that you can report back to your client. Whereas email, while it can work, and I do suggest using it, it's certainly more, I would say, more like an add-on, not where you're going to be booking the bulk of your meetings.
Email. I almost don't believe in it, but I have like we work with Lavender, if you know them at all.
Yeah.
I offload like all of our email stuff to them. So like they're helping us out internally. But I totally agree. Like with email, like with what you're saying, and this is going to be one of my several hills to die on, is there are a lot of agencies out there who, at least this is speaking from experience with my clients, there are a lot of agencies out there who will build you a list of leads. You look at the company and titles, they're not at all who you're trying to sell to. But you don't find that out until months later because you don't get instant feedback on emails. So like I've had an experience where we're calling into client accounts that they give us that they've already been emailing, and they're investing $5-6 grand a year on email infrastructure. And I'm like, dude, we cannot sell ice to Eskimos, or like this list is just not aligned at all with what we're trying to sell. And people don't figure that out unless either A, they like take a long, hard manual look at the list, or they start calling them.
Mm-hmm. So you work with your clients, they're providing the list always, or are there times where you will go find the list?
This is another one. I don't think people like this joke very much, but I'll kick off with the client. I'm like, hey, anybody on this list is fair game for pay-per meeting, right? And I tell you, please look at the list first, because otherwise the consulting is free. Meaning, I'll bring you meetings with somebody on this list. If you don't like the meetings or they're not the right person, that's the consulting for you, you know? So historically, you know, velocity has always been a really big thing for us, at least for me, because we can get a list of 5,000 people and turn that into however much money in 4 or 5 days. Like we're like piranhas. We'll go through lists. Historically, clients would give us lists. Sometimes that would work. Probably 70% of the time it would work okay, right? So like incomplete data, not having their LinkedIn's, not having even, sometimes we were calling people we didn't even know their title, which was good practice, because I'm like, if you can book a meeting with somebody you know nothing about, that's amazing. You really got them to share information. Now, though, I advocate that I build the list, and I basically wholesale data. I use 𝐾𝐨, which is expensive. It ends up being like, I'm charging anywhere from like 30 to 40 cents per fully enriched contact, depending on like what buying signals and stuff we have to do. But I've looked at all of them, man. Nothing's perfect, but when I use 𝐾𝐨, fully enriched contacts, it works well enough that we can like measure the profitability and impact to margin, right? So if I'm paying, I don't know, $0.25 per contact, I spend $250 on 1,000 good contacts, well, we can shake out easily 10 meetings from that. Like our average across time, and obviously like there's nuance and it's hard to measure, but we're, at least me, I'm booking probably a meeting for 1 in every 75 or every 1 in 100 people I reach out to with a good list.
Connecting or just dialing?
Just dialing.
Just dialing? That's impressive. So I agree, because there's been times where we've had clients say, oh, we already have the list, we'll provide it to you. It always backfires because it's never good. It's always missing information.
Dude, that is so funny. It always backfires because it's never good. I like that.
Yeah, because they'll say they have it's all in the CRM, but really it hasn't. No one's gone through it in years. So we found, and we have been doing this really for a long time, these are exceptions that we've made with clients to use their list, but it never works out. It's never good data, and ultimately it ends up backfiring on us because we're spending time calling the wrong people.
Oh my God. Well, it's like, as a founder, I can kind of stomach that. I'm like, all right, I just burned 30 minutes. I'll talk to the client. We'll get it going. But my reps, they're really the ones who kind of like add a sense of urgency just to like continuous improvement. Cause they're like, dude, Fletcher, we kick off with these guys. We're trying to sell, like, here's an example of like a nuance that gets lost between marketing and sales teams. It's like, there's a couple of flavors of HR technology, right? Like one for recruiting, one for talent management. And if you're trying to sell a talent management solution to recruiters, both of who have HR, like, you know, categorically in their title, you're not going to have a good time. So I'm sure you see this, since you guys are like operators, like boots on the ground. But for a lot of organizations, there's a kind of a gap between what marketing is doing building the lists and then who sales needs to reach out to.
One other thing, so it's not that common. We get requests for pay per meeting or pay per performance, which we turn down or will refer out quite a bit because we've gone down that road and it's doesn't make a whole lot of sense for us. Most of the companies doing pay per meeting are doing email blasts. They're essentially super low cost email or LinkedIn, and that's where it makes sense. How have you been able to stomach that, or at least been able to, maybe a better question is, how do you decide who to work with and who not to? If your cold calling it is more expensive to do, how do you go about who's going to be a successful client and a good client?
This episode is sponsored by LevelUp Leads, a B2B sales development and appointment setting agency. Companies always need pipeline, but they oftentimes don't want to hire SDRs internally. The whole process is risky and expensive. You've got hiring costs, onboarding, training, additional spend on your tech stack, a few months to ramp up. And with that being said, SDRs are a high turnover position, and the person you hire might not necessarily work out, so you need to start all over again. That's why companies outsource this. LevelUp Leads allocates a team of people, their tech stack, so you can onboard and launch your campaigns in about a week. They set qualified meetings in your calendar so your team has more selling opportunities. Visit levelupleads.io today to learn more. All right, now back to the show.
Oh man, that's a great question. And you're giving me okay. So we're not doing dial for dollars anymore because I think I don't know if it's the best way. Okay, but to answer your question, we test things really, really fast, right? So like we'll do a kickoff, like because a lot of my deals are in network people I've known that kind of trust me already, or like we've been working towards it. I can test the viability of a list, like the data quality, within 30 minutes. I can test the viability of a pitch within an hour, right? So like, for example, I will burn time calling, like, for example, one account that we struggled with was like a technology company for mental health, more or less, like client onboarding and stuff. And I just could not get the right pitch initially talking to like, owners of mental health care facilities. Like, hey, we're a AI-driven onboarding and enablement platform for mental health. If we struggle to articulate the value in a 5-second, explain to a kindergartner, soundbite, it will not work. I've struggled with some other organizations. Well, I guess to answer your question, I'm always open to try it. If we can get to a good pay per meeting, because for me, it's almost statistical. I'm like, okay, well, if I can book 2 meetings an hour for 4 hours a day, that's going to keep the lights on. It's okay. And I'm always open to test things, like fail fast, because no matter what, we're going to provide value. Like you're saying, like, okay, well, the list wasn't right. The pitch wasn't right. It didn't seem like there's really product market fit. We can try something else. But like to answer your question more directly, our ideal client has a product that is somewhat novel or protected, meaning it's either new or ambiguous. So on the side of like ambiguity, there's required to be education around it. Like you need a subject matter expert to teach you what, for example, like the SBA, Small Business Administration landscape looks like, or what these kind of corporate life insurance policies look like. There's a healthy amount of education that as a buyer, you need to be aware of. So that's always a really, really good kind of compelling offer is education. And then kind of piggybacking on that, the introductory offer is really important. So like, what can I tell John, a stranger on the phone, in 15, 20 seconds that is going to add value immediately? So going back to those examples, an example of that was for SBA lending, like, okay, well, we'll walk through what's changed in the SBA and what you could qualify for. For a stranger on the phone, that's good. Similarly, like a huge total addressable market is really helpful because again, like it's almost like it's just statistics. Like we're going to book a meeting for every 100 people, maybe every 200 people, maybe if it's one of my reps, not me. If we can get 50,000 contacts, we're going to get hundreds of meetings. So we will, kind of gravitate more towards where we have more contacts. And this is the benefit, at least, of dial for dollars, is that we are flexible in our output, that we can kind of follow the money. Like, for example, I've had accounts that get really hot. I'll bring in a couple of reps. The whole entire Ordessa team, 7-8 reps, is all dialing for one account. And I don't know if this is a good idea because we end up burning out all of our budget in 1 month. But we can be opportunistic, right? We can kind of follow the money, so to speak. that's a kind of some broad things. But the most important thing, just like anything else, is like product market fit and the ability to articulate the value really quickly. So we find that out.
Yeah. What we found is some spaces are just like very difficult. For example, something like cybersecurity is very crowded and competitive. Something like an SEO agency or a web development agency, there's so many others out there that it's difficult to sell. So there's certain things like that where historically, when you get work with enough companies, this tends to be a challenging, just because there's nothing really different between one versus the other.
I love that. No, there's a bunch. Let's say there are like 3 flavors of accounts that we kind of work with. One is like, I almost call them like binary type of decisions. Like, for an example, an accounting firm, business financing. Statistically, a certain portion of a certain ICP will be looking for that at some point in their life. Like, if you're an owner of a business, probably 2 months out of the year, you're going to be thinking about getting a loan. If you're, if you're a CFO, probably 20% are thinking about outsourcing their accounting, right? So it's not even so much being clever or differentiating. It's just being in the right place at the right time with some degree of a warm intro. Like, for our accounting firm, shout out 𝐬𝐮𝐬𝐫𝐷. They're like my first client. I love these guys. But it's like, hey, we're an accounting firm based out of Tampa, reaching out to business owners across the state of Florida. Is that something you have experience with, John, working with an external firm? Just get the conversation going, So it's just kind of time and place. Another category is like compelling either offer or compelling technology, especially when compared against like the legacy. I'll use like 2 client examples here. Another one of our first kind of like really hot clients where we were producing over 100 meetings a month was Lavender. Will Allred's the founder and all those guys. They're great. But the compelling kind of offer was this quick story about how Lavender started as an email company, analyzed emails for 5 years. Now we have a unique agentic outbound system based on a database of high converting emails. That's novel. Most people can't say that. So like, novelty is really big. And then the last one that I will totally agree with you. We have struggled when it's kind of like a non-differentiated offer for a service. So like you were mentioning, like calling about like an SEO service. It's like, well, it's very challenging to articulate anything novel for a repeatable service on the phone. And like, transparently, I have booked very few of our clients cold calling. Almost all of 𝐸⁸ outbound is via my LinkedIn post. People just say, can we talk about meetings? But it's very challenging, and hopefully somebody can teach me how to do it. But it's hard to differentiate as a service over the phone unless you have like a unique, compelling offer. So like for 𝐸⁸, for example, we are doing some degree of outbound on the phones, at least this month. But our compelling offer is, hey, we're a business development agency. We do dial for dollars, so there's very little risk up front. First meeting's free. Something like that,
That's nice. So 2 questions. One, who is writing the scripts when you work with a new company? Is that a collaborative effort? Do you write that? How does that come about? First question, and I will follow.
My reps might have a different answer than me, but I try to stay away from scripts. I try to do enablement so people can understand the industry problem and translate that into their own words. One of like this is why you don't be surprised when we stop doing dial for dollars in a couple of years. But what I advocate for is that within each of us is like this secret sauce. Within each of us, there's like this level of performance or articulation that is going to be specific based on our personality, our vocabulary, our level of understanding, our general tone. When you're on the quest to brew your own sauce, you can look at other people's sauces, their ingredients as inspiration, but do not steal it, right? So I do not advocate that people read a script verbatim. I advocate that they understand what the outcomes are, what the legacy process is, who these people are, and just know enough to have a 3-minute conversation and ask intelligent questions. But to like kind of go back into like how we scale or templatize it out, whatever, my philosophy on cold calling is to elicit positive emotion, rapport, as quickly as possible. So no matter what, and this is good. This is going to be this summer. We'll do an ebook on how it works. But no matter what, on every call, I say, John, hey, how you doing, sir? Or John, hey, how's it going? How's your day going? Always. That is because when you hear John, Everyone likes to hear their name. I love to hear my name. Hey, how's it going? What's going on? That gives you an opportunity to say yes again. Say, hey, yeah, I'm doing good. How are you? If somebody says, how are you back to me, they're in trouble. Then I say, hey, you know what, John, I'm doing great. Not everybody asks that in this industry. The goal is to get a laugh. Regardless of all this other stuff I'm saying, if you can get them to laugh the first 15 seconds, there's at least a 50-50 shot you're getting a meeting. Doesn't matter. But the kind of flow, again, within the first 5 to 10 seconds is name, ask how you doing, have a quick conversation. It's this idea of stacking yeses to get them in the habit of saying yes. So we do the short form stack yeses. After that, it would go like, okay, let's just go through it. John, hey, how you doing? What's going on? Oh, I'm doing good. How are you, Fletcher? Like, hey, you know what? I'm doing great, John. I appreciate you asking. Not everybody does. Hey, my name is Fletcher Cox. I'm calling you from my company, 𝐼𝐸𝐴. We're a dial for dollars agency, and you guys only pay per meeting. Is that, John, something you're close to at all? Is that speaking your language? So it goes, introduction, Fletcher. I'm over at, or I lead go-to-market. People like agency. People like ownership of what you do. I lead go-to-market at 𝐼𝐸𝐴. We do this. 5 to 10 word explanation. Then as quickly as I can. I want to talk as little as I can. I put the ball back in John's court and say, is that something you're familiar with? And then my favorite one, I'm putting this on a t-shirt, is that speaking your language? Which is a question that if you have the right fit, like if I'm calling a CRO and I ask, hey, are you guys active on the phones? Is that speaking your language? It forces them to express their perspective, their experience, their ego, right? So then they become, it's not this profound, but it's like, then they become more invested in the conversation. So I would almost say those initial steps are big just to get them going. And then, once you have somebody talking about their experience, it's just a matter of asking intelligent questions to kind of guide them in a direction, and just never take no for an answer. Never. Like, even like if they say an objection, like, oh yeah, of course. Yeah, definitely. Just validate as much as you can. I don't know.
Yeah.
But yeah,
real quick, I just want to say, what I'm hearing out of all this is you're not following scripts, but there's a framework and there's a science behind what you guys are doing. Right. You just laid it all out with the yeses. And so like, I do think I am a fan of everyone's going to have their own way and their own style. With us, we work with enough clients that they want something, like certain things said a certain way. They're very meticulous about certain things. So we do have to have a script, but yeah, over time you should be able, if you're calling, at least when I used to cold call, after a little while, you almost memorize it. You memorize the conversation, and you really don't need to follow a script because you've done it so many times in your head. So
it's almost automatic. I mean, sometimes I'll be playing my Game Boy while I'm cold calling, playing Pokemon. But I do create, to answer your question, I don't create like scripts like, you say this, then you say this. It's more of a company brief, like overview, industry overview, legacy process. And then I'll do a script stacking yeses, because I want everybody to have like an inventory of 15 bullets. Like, oh, well, we actually work really well in heavily regulated industries because we're SOC 2 compliant. Doesn't matter if you know what that means, but just know that when somebody mentions security, you can bring up this kind of category of bullets. So that's like an area, that's kind of how I spend some, like maybe 4 hours a week, 3 hours a week, tweaking, building new pitches. But what's great about Orem is like we're capturing everything. So like if somebody is, and I always advocate for people to act like an owner. Like the way I build the company is that people can basically get paid just like I do, pay per meeting, and I'm paying them north of 50% per meeting, especially as like the more they get. So it's like part of it is self-improving. Like you have access, every rep has access to every call or every call transcript for every client, or at least like the notes, so they can go in and figure out like how do you pitch it? Because like I don't know if this is like I don't want to die on this hill or anything, but it's pretty systematic. Like we're doing the same thing over and over again. And once you hit the right title, timing, tone, it's going to work out.
And do you, when you work with your clients, is there some type of, whether it's written agreement or verbal agreement of like, hey, we'll give it X amount of time, like to get this figured out, and then you can either part ways if it's working or not working?
I'll do like a 60-day proof of concept. For example, like 10 meeting budget, something like that. But I've gotten fired before for booking too many meetings on the first day. Cause it can be overwhelming. Like some days, my biggest day ever was maybe 12 meetings, and that included some like rebookings on Ghost, let's say. But, for one account, we booked them like, I don't even know, over 100 meetings in a month. And our per meeting is maybe I'm not going to tell you right now, but we can really, people find out quick if we're going to go. We've gotten fired for not booking any meetings and too many, never in the middle.
If they were smart, they would know that the cost per meeting makes sense for them. So if you book meetings, as long as they're good, it shouldn't matter, right? That's what they would want, unless they don't have the budget to pay that out right away. But yeah, if you didn't do the math, then that's on them, right? If you're doing a cost per meeting, they know what the price is. It should all make sense.
I told the consulting's free. I told you.
Yeah. Now, you laid out a lot of really valuable things around how you guys are doing cold calling. What are some things you look for when you're actually looking to bring someone on like a new SDR? What are there any traits you see that like, hey, this person's going to be great, or they're not going to perform? You're not quite sure. What do you look for?
What is it? Desperation. No, because you can make money quick. Like I'll pay reps anywhere between like 150 and sometimes upwards of like $300 per meeting once they're up and going. I look for people who are entrepreneurial, just hands down. People who have failed before, which is typically like have been in other SDR roles, and people who are comfortable with uncertainty, because like the phones, I book about 100 meetings a month, every month. Some days I book 0. Some days I book 10. Most days I book between 4 and 6, right? So people who can stomach like the ups and downs of it are really important. But I mean, dude, some of my best reps were not software salespeople. One of my favorite reps was a cowboy in South Dakota. Shout out Derek. Our first day onboarding, he was like, yo, one sec, I got to go plug in my computer. Battery's broken. I'm like, what's wrong with your battery? He's like, oh, well, I left it plugged in for 4 years and never used it, so it's all messed up. I'm like, wow, so you haven't used a computer in 4 years? That's amazing.
Yeah. And
so
you kick butt?
Yeah, he's good. Yeah, and actually, specifically with Derek, his his connect to conversation was horrible. Meaning he wasn't keeping anyone on the phone for longer than a minute. But his conversation to meeting at one point was like 70%, which meant he was being like, hey, we do this. Is that something you're interested in? All right, see you later. So qualifying super fast, and it was just hilarious. But the main thing I look for is resilience, and I like optimism, like to not let the grind. Because I mean, dude, I'll sit there for 2 hours, not get a meeting. You're like, oh my God, it's not going to work. And then you'll get 4 meetings in the last 30 minutes of the day. So like that. And then just being a people person, like people who can learn, kind of manage things on their own. I don't know. It's like Ordessa, again, is all commission only, top to bottom. So, and we have very small deals. So like the ability to just continually output is very, very important.
Yeah. It's the commission only is tough. I used to be a tennis coach and I was on commission only. So really every lesson you teach is the same concept. It's like you're only getting paid. And there were days where there was no lessons. And it's not like you can go outbound, not really easily. You got to be at the venue. And then I've also done cold calling commission only, and it's you're going to have some really like high highs, and you're like, oh my God, I'm kicking serious butt, and then some lows. You're just like, what am I doing here? So yeah, there's ups and downs if you're commission only.
Yeah, we'll see how long I do it, because like when it was just me and a couple reps, and we had discounted software on a trial, there's all margin. But longer term, especially now that we have this evidence of value that we've created, I will likely, kind of diversify some of our services. One thing I'm doing now that is kind of like, well, I guess like taking a step back, I always look for things that are like self-improving in nature. An example of that now is me building lists. So I will build lists for a client. I sell it to them for about as much, maybe a little more expensive than if they built it themselves, but we know the data is high quality, at least based on our experience, and we know that it's the right titles because we're salespeople and we've been calling into a client. So like, just like a kind of a little timeline, client gives us a list, call them. Okay, we call them for 3 days. We hate these titles. They're horrible. Okay, Fletcher, you build the list. We build a list based on industry title, whatever. And then the client basically invests in us to enrich it. So that's like a little margin there. But we see much higher data quality and conversion rates based on that list. So it's kind of like self-improving. Longer term, I don't know. At least for now, what's nice about Dial for Dollars is we're gathering a lot of data on how to book meetings, on how to get strangers to say yes, on how to turn, like, I don't know. I like to think about things kind of philosophically. It's like alchemy, right? We're taking nothing, just like a blank slate, and creating some degree of an opportunity. So I figure we'll do that. At least I've told myself we're going to Dial for Dollars until I get to 1,000 meetings since inception, which should be sometime around, I don't know, April, May. And then from there, we'll see how else we want to kind of add value.
So I want to add one of the things you mentioned when you're looking for an SDR, you're looking for overcoming challenges, right? And you mentioned the trip down from California all the way down to Argentina. And I've traveled a lot to know there's a lot of great things that come with travel, but there's also a lot of challenges, language barriers, things break, you lose things, something gets stolen. It doesn't come without its challenges. Walk through some of the challenges of that entire trip. Something, and if you can, tie it back into work.
Okay, I'll preface all this by saying never listen to your brain when it's telling you to stop, because you don't really need to. It's all just like perception. But yeah, I write about this a little bit. But like outcomes are very rare. Outcomes are separated by, the case of the journey, thousands of miles. Like you look at the distance, like the reason that the stars shine so bright is because there's darkness between them. There's non-events, there's non-outcomes. And so as an SDR, as a salesperson, really as an entrepreneur, that meme of the guy, like, mining for diamonds and he turns around right at the end. You have to be willing to suffer through the lows to find those little pockets of gold. And that was like pretty similar within the trip itself. I'd say like generally though, the hardest part of the trip wasn't the specific challenges themselves. It was just the monotony. It was just driving 200, 300, 400 miles a day on these, rutted dirt roads in the middle of nowhere, just being like, I'm really out here. Got to keep going. Mm-hmm. It was deciding what to eat every day. It was the lack of routine. It was these small little pieces of sand in your shoe that wear you down. Similar, it's just dialing. So it's like the more you can like recognize the objective monotony, the more you can kind of enjoy yourself and just say, okay, well, this is just kind of how it goes. So like in the case of business, it's like, okay, we're just going to make dials. I'm not going to think about the emotional outcome of each 30 minutes. We're going to look at things over the course of weeks and months and not hours and days. So that translates, but specifically on the trip, I love this stuff. So there was a couple of, I'll reference a couple of different stories and, you can kind of like, glean the difficulty from it. The first one, this was like an inflection point of the trip where I realized, okay, I'm really not in the United States anymore. I'm in way southern Mexico. Like the trip really just got turned up to 11. I was in this little town outside of, south of Puerto Escondido called Bahia San Agustin. Drove there from Oaxaca in one day. I had all these issues with the car, obviously, like a stolen tire before, but all the solution or all the problems ended up like self-correcting. But this was kind of like where I felt like I entered the trip in reality. So I was spearfishing at this little hotel. The hotel man was like, hey, by the way, the cartel assassinated somebody here like 6 months ago. That's why it's so cheap, but don't worry, you're safe. I'm like, all right, we'll see. So I was spearfishing. I came back, didn't get any fish. I was sitting on like a hotel porch, like drinking a beer. I see my dog. I have a husky. Maybe I'll pull him up in a sec. And he has this big chicken in his mouth. He had killed like a neighboring chicken or something. So I go down, pull this chicken out of his mouth. And I'm like, oh man, it's like 8 p.m. I could just ditch this chicken and hit the road early tomorrow, not worry about it. Or I haven't eaten dinner yet. Maybe we should just eat the chicken. What is it? Hit two birds with one stone, literally. And so that night, cleaned this skinny little chicken with like hand soap buckets, just like very savage, sweat streaming down my face, just to set the scene. Like my hotel caretaker, Levy, was playing like these Spanish covers of The Doors, like Jim Morrison. So it was like a very kind of like medieval scene. Ate the chicken, and I was like, okay, we are really in South America now. That was kind of the first like hurdle into the night, so to speak. There's all sorts of issues of like threading the needle. And it was a great sales experience overall, specifically like crossing the borders. Every time you cross a border in Central America, there's all these guys coming up to you, shouting nonsense in your ear. And you just have to tell them, okay, here's $20. Here's what we're doing. Let's cut the line. Like you had to be kind of like disciplined about it. And there's all this ambiguity. And so you kind of had to not worry about what else to do and only do like the task in front of you. Every border crossing would require documents for the car, for me, for the dog. there was no standard process around that. So you just kind of had to go for it and have a positive attitude. I could tell you more about the border crossings, but like specifically going from Nicaragua into Costa Rica, I didn't have some permit for the dog or something. And so we smuggled the dog into Costa Rica, meaning like you just put it in the back of the car. It's not like there's like pet police, but there's dogs walking back and forth from the border. Had to get this Costa Rican animal export permit. Only had basically like 20 hours to pick up the permit and drive 16 hours to Panama. Had this one mega day where I drove from northern Costa Rica to San Jose, picked up this animal export permit from somebody's grandma at the airport. I gave her flowers because I had to really annoy him to get it in time. And then drove 12 more hours through the night to Panama to get my car inspected before I loaded onto a shipping container. So there's very tight margins. And so it's just like, you got to keep going, man. And I think that's just how things go, is like there are going to be times where things really need to go smoothly. There are going to be times where you can kind of relax, but you got to just keep going.
I think that's super cool. There's a lot of correlations there. I would like to learn more about that trip later, but I just want to thank you for coming on. I appreciate it. Thanks for sharing some tips. Where's the best place for people to find you?
Find me on LinkedIn. That's where it's my favorite social media. Or even better, call me. I answer every cold call.
What's your number?
You got to find it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Fair enough. All right. Thanks for coming on, Fletcher.
I appreciate you, dude. Yeah. See you soon.